Bible in a Year, Day 189, readings from the Holy Bible. The second book of Kings, chapters 23, second book of Chronicles, chapter 34, and Proverbs, chapter 8. Second book of Kings, chapter 23. The king then had all the elders of Judah and of Jerusalem summoned before him. The king went up to the house of the Lord with all the people of Judah and all the inhabitants of Jerusalem, priests, prophets, and all the people, great and small. He read aloud to them all the words of the book of the covenant that had been found in the house of the Lord. The king stood by the column and made a covenant in the presence of the Lord to follow the Lord and to observe his commandments, statutes, and decrees with his whole heart and soul, and to re-establish the words of the covenant written in this book. And all the people stood by the covenant. Josiah's religious reform. Then the king commanded the high priest Hilkiah, his assistant priests, and the doorkeepers to remove from the temple of the Lord all the objects that had been made for Baal, Asherah, and the whole host of heaven. These he burned outside Jerusalem on the slopes of the Kidron. Their ashes were carried to Bethel. He also put an end to the idolatrous priests whom the kings of Judah had appointed to burn incense on the high places in the cities of Judah and in the vicinity of Jerusalem, as well as those who burned incense to Baal, to the sun, moon, and signs of the zodiac, and to the whole host of heaven. From the house of the Lord he also removed the Asherah to the Wadi Kidron outside Jerusalem. He burned it and beat it to the dust in the Wadi Kidron and scattered its dust over the graveyard of the people of the land. He tore down the apartments of the cult prostitutes in the house of the Lord, where the women wove garments for the Asherah. He brought in all the priests from the cities of Judah and then defiled from Jeba to Beersheba the high places where they had offered incense. He also tore down the high places of the gates which were at the entrance of the gate of Joshua, governor of the city, north of the city gate. The priests of the high places could not function at the altar of the Lord in Jerusalem, but they, along with their relatives, ate the unleavened bread. The king also defiled Topheth in the valley of Beth Hinnom, so that there would no longer be any immolation of sons or daughters by fire in honor of Molech. He did away with the horses which the kings of Judah had dedicated to the sun. These were at the entrance of the house of the Lord near the chamber of Nathan-Melech the official, which was in the large building. The chariots of the sun he destroyed by fire. He also demolished the altars made by the kings of Judah on the roof terrace of Ahaz, and the altars made by Manasseh in the two courts of the Lord's house. He pulverized them and threw the dust into the Wadi Kidron. The king defiled the high places east of Jerusalem, south of the Mount of the Destroyer, which Solomon king of Israel had built in honor of Astarte, the Sidonian horror, of Shemosh, the Moabite horror, and of Milcom, the Ammonites' abomination. He broke to pieces the pillars, cut down the Asherahs, and filled the places where they had been with human bones. Likewise, the altar which was at Bethel, the high place built by Jeroboam son of Nebat, who caused Israel to sin, this same altar and high place he tore down and burned, grinding the high place to powder and burning the Asherah. When Josiah turned and saw the graves there on the mountainside, he ordered the bones taken from the graves and burned on the altar, and thus defiled it, according to the Lord's word, proclaimed by the man of God, as Jeroboam stood by the altar on the feast day. When the king looked up and saw the grave of the man of God who had proclaimed these words, he asked, "What is that marker I see?" The people of the city replied, "The grave of the man of God who came from Judah and proclaimed the very things you have done to the altar in Bethel." "Let him be," he said, "let no one move his bones." So they left his bones undisturbed, together with the bones of the prophet who had come from Samaria. Josiah also removed all the temples on the high places in the cities of Samaria which the kings of Israel had built. Provoking the Lord, he did the very same to them as he had done in Bethel. He slaughtered upon the altars all the priests of the high places that were there, and burned human bones upon them. Then he returned to Jerusalem. The king issued a command to all the people, "Observe the Passover of the Lord your God, as it is written in this book of the covenant. No Passover such as this had been observed during the period when the judges ruled Israel, or during the entire period of the kings of Israel and the kings of Judah, until the 18th year of King Josiah, when this Passover of the Lord was kept in Jerusalem. Further, Josiah purged the consultation of ghosts and spirits with the household gods, idols, and all the other horrors to be seen in the land of Judah and in Jerusalem, so that he might carry out the words of the law that were written in the book that Hilkiah the priest had found in the house of the Lord. Before him there had been no king who turned to the Lord as he did, with his whole heart, his whole being, and his whole strength, in accord with the entire law of Moses, nor did any king like him arise after him. Yet the Lord did not turn from his fiercely burning anger against Judah, because of all the provocations that Manasseh had given. The Lord said, Even Judah will I put out of my sight, as I did Israel. I will reject the city, Jerusalem, which I chose, and the house of which I said, There shall my name be. The rest of the acts of Josiah, with all that he did, are recorded in the book of the Chronicles of the kings of Judah. In his time, Pharaoh Necho, king of Egypt, went up toward the Euphrates river against the king of Assyria. King Josiah set out to meet him, but was slain at Megiddo at the first encounter. His servants brought his body on a chariot from Megiddo to Jerusalem, where they buried him in his own grave. Then the people of the land took Jehoahaz, son of Josiah, anointed him, and proclaimed him king to succeed his father. Reign of Jehoahaz. Jehoahaz was 23 years old when he became king, and he reigned 3 months in Jerusalem. His mother's name was Hamutal, daughter of Jeremiah from Libnah. He did what was evil in the Lord's sight, just as his ancestors had done. Pharaoh Necho took him prisoner at Riblah in the land of Hamath, thus ending his reign in Jerusalem. He imposed a fine upon the land of 100 talents of silver and a talent of gold. Pharaoh Necho then made Eliakim, son of Josiah, king in place of Josiah his father. He changed his name to Jehoiakim. Jehoahaz he took away with him to Egypt, where he died. Jehoiakim gave the silver and gold to Pharaoh, but taxed the land to raise the amount Pharaoh demanded. He exacted the silver and gold from the people of the land, from each proportionately, to pay Pharaoh Necho. Reign of Jehoiakim. Jehoiakim was 25 years old when he became king, and he reigned 11 years in Jerusalem. His mother's name was Zebidah, daughter of Pedaiah from Rumah. He did what was evil in the Lord's sight, just as his ancestors had done. The word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. 2 Chronicles chapter 34. Josiah's reforms. Josiah was 8 years old when he became king, and he reigned 31 years in Jerusalem. He did what was right in the Lord's sight, walking in the way of David his father, not turning right or left. In the 8th year of his reign, while he was still a youth, he began to seek after the God of David his father. Then in his 12th year, he began to purify Judah and Jerusalem of the high places, the Asherahs and the carved and molten images. In his presence, the altars of the Baals were torn down, the incense stands erected above them he broke down, the Asherahs and the carved and molten images he smashed and beat into dust, which he scattered over the tombs of those who had sacrificed to them. And the bones of the priests he burned upon their altars. Thus he purified Judah and Jerusalem. He did likewise in the cities of Manasseh, Ephraim, Simeon, and in the ruined villages of the surrounding country, as far as Naphtali. He tore down the altars and Asherahs, and the carved images he beat into dust, and broke down the incense stands throughout the land of Israel. Then he returned to Jerusalem. The temple restored. In the 18th year of his reign, in order to purify the land and the temple, he sent Shaphan, son of Azaliah, Maaseiah, the ruler of the city, and Joah, son of Joahaz, the chancellor, to restore the house of the Lord his God. They came to Hilkiah the high priest and turned over the money brought to the house of God, which the Levites, the guardians of the threshold, had collected from Manasseh, Ephraim, and all the remnant of Israel, as well as from all of Judah, Benjamin, and the inhabitants of Jerusalem. They turned it over to the master workers in the house of the Lord, and these in turn used it to pay the workers in the Lord's house who were restoring and repairing it. They also gave it to the carpenters and the masons to buy hewn stone and timber for the tie beams and rafters of the buildings which the kings of Judah had allowed to fall into ruin. The men worked faithfully at their task. Their overseers were Jahath and Obadiah, Levites of the line of Merari, and Zechariah and Meshullam of the Kohathites who directed them. All those Levites who were skillful with musical instruments were in charge of the men who carried the burdens, and they directed all the workers in every kind of labor. Some of the other Levites were scribes, officials, and gatekeepers. The finding of the law. When they brought out the money that had been deposited in the house of the Lord, Hilkiah the priest found the book of the law of the Lord given through Moses. He reported this to Shaphan the scribe, saying, I have found the book of the law in the house of the Lord. Hilkiah gave the book to Shaphan, who brought it to the king at the same time that he made his report to him. He said, Your servants are doing everything that has been entrusted to them. They have smelted down the silver deposited in the Lord's house and have turned it over to the overseers and the workers. Then Shaphan the scribe also informed the king, Hilkiah the priest has given me a book, and then Shaphan read it in the presence of the king. When the king heard the words of the law, he tore his garments. The king then issued this command to Hilkiah, to Ahikam, son of Shaphan, to Abdon, son of Micah, to Shaphan the scribe, and to Asaiah the king's servant. Go consult the Lord for me and for those who are left in Israel and Judah about the words of the book that has been found. For the anger of the Lord burns furiously against us, because our ancestors did not keep the word of the Lord and have not done all that is written in this book. Then Hilkiah and others from the king went to Huldah the prophet, wife of Shallum, son of Tokath, son of Hasrah, keeper of the wardrobe. She lived in Jerusalem in the second quarter. They spoke to her as they had been instructed. And she said to them, Thus says the Lord, the God of Israel, say to the man who sent you to me, Thus says the Lord, I am about to bring evil upon this place and upon its inhabitants, all the curses written in the book that was read before the king of Judah, because they have abandoned me and have burned incense to other gods, provoking me by all the works of their hands. My anger burns against this place, and it cannot be extinguished. But to the king of Judah who sent you to consult the Lord, give this response. Thus says the Lord, the God of Israel, as for the words you have heard, because you were heartsick and have humbled yourself before God when you heard his words concerning this place and its inhabitants, because you humbled yourself before me, tore your garments, and wept before me, I in turn have heard oracle of the Lord. I will gather you to your ancestors, and you shall go to your grave in peace. And your eyes shall not see all the evil I am about to bring upon this place and upon its inhabitants. This they reported to the king. Covenant renewal. The king then had all the elders of Judah and of Jerusalem summoned before him. The king went up to the house of the Lord with all the people of Judah and the inhabitants of Jerusalem, priests, Levites, and all the people, great and small. He read aloud to them all the words of the book of the covenant that had been found in the house of the Lord. The king stood by the column and made a covenant in the presence of the Lord to follow the Lord and to observe his commandments, statutes, and decrees with his whole heart and soul, carrying out the words of the covenant written in this book. He thereby committed all who were in Jerusalem and Benjamin, and the inhabitants of Jerusalem acted according to the covenant of God, the God of their ancestors. Josiah removed every abomination from all the territories belonging to the Israelites, and he obliged all who were in Israel to serve the Lord their God. During his lifetime, they did not turn away from following the Lord, the God of their ancestors. The word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. Proverbs chapter 8. The discourse of wisdom. Does not wisdom call, and understanding raise her voice? On the top of the heights along the road, at the crossroads she takes her stand. By the gates, at the approaches of the city, in the entryway she cries aloud, To you, O people, I call, my appeal is to you mortals. You naive ones, gain prudence, you fools, gain sense. Listen, for noble things I speak, my lips proclaim honest words. Indeed, my mouth utters wisdom, and my lips abhor wickedness. All the words of my mouth are sincere, none of them wily or crooked. All of them are straightforward to the intelligent, and right to those who attain knowledge. Take my instruction instead of silver, and knowledge rather than choice gold. For wisdom is better than corals, and no treasures can compare with her. I, wisdom, dwell with prudence, and useful knowledge I have. The fear of the Lord is hatred of evil, pride, arrogance, the evil way, and the perverse mouth I hate. Mine are counsel and advice, mine is strength, I am understanding. By me kings reign and rulers enact justice. By me princes govern and nobles, all the judges of the earth. Those who love me I also love, and those who seek me find me. With me are riches and honor, wealth that endures and righteousness. My fruit is better than gold, even pure gold, and my yield than choice silver. On the way of righteousness I walk along the paths of justice, granting wealth to those who love me and filling their treasuries. The Lord begot me, the beginning of his works, the forerunner of his deeds of long ago. From of old I was formed at the first before the earth, when there was no deeps I was brought forth, and when there were no fountains or springs of water, before the mountains were settled into place. Before the hills I was brought forth, when the earth and the fields were not yet made, nor the first clods of the world. When he established the heavens, there was I, when he marked out the vault over the face of the deep. When he made firm the skies above, when he fixed fast the springs of the deep, when he set for the sea its limits so that the waters should not transgress his command, when he fixed the foundations of earth, then was I beside him as artisan. I was his delight day by day, playing before him all the while, playing over the whole of his earth, having my delight with human beings. Now, children, listen to me. Happy are they who keep my ways. Listen to instruction and grow wise. Do not reject it. Happy the one who listens to me, attending daily at my gates, keeping watch at my doorposts. Whoever finds me finds life and wins favor from the Lord. But those who pass me by do violence to themselves. All who hate me love death. The word of the Lord. Thanks be to God.